In the wake of a devastating earthquake, a bizarre structure previously hidden beneath the earth was revealed, catching the eye of local authorities and curious onlookers alike. Among them was Carter, a former Marine with a knack for adventure who couldn't resist the pull of the unknown. Venturing closer than anyone else dared, Carter began to uncover the secrets of this strange formation, his military training kicking in as he navigated the precarious terrain. But what he found inside the structure turned his seasoned composure into sheer disbelief, leaving him utterly pale. He'd been walking along the beach when the earthquake hit. He tried to stay upright, but the ground was shaking too much. People screamed around him, and children began to cry. It wasn't a long earthquake, but it was big enough to do some damage. Car alarms were going off, windows were shattered, and street lights had fallen to the ground. When the earth settled down again, he saw a group of people gathering a little further down the coast, so he headed over there. He couldn't immediately see what the commotion was about, but as he pushed himself through the crowd, he suddenly saw they were all staring at something sticking out of the ground, with sand still gliding down the sides. "This wasn't here before," someone said. "What is it?" someone else asked. No one knew what the strange structure was, and neither did Carter, yet. Suddenly, a police officer arrived. All right, nothing to see here," he said as he waved his hands around. People began to walk away, but Carter stayed, his curiosity getting the better of him. "Hey, you," the police officer said, after Carter was the only one left on the beach. "Didn't you hear me?" But Carter was too caught up in his own thoughts. The structure looked so familiar to him that it was giving him chills. He was suddenly snapped back to reality when the officer grabbed him tightly by the arm. "Get out of here," he said, but Carter refused. He showed the police officer one of the Marine badges he always carried with him, and he immediately loosened his grip. "Let me help you," Carter asked hopefully. Being near the structure made him feel something he hadn't felt in a long time, the thrill of discovering the unknown. Since he had been forced to leave the Marine because of a health issue, he had felt purposeless. But now his drive was back, and it was stronger than ever. The officer looked hesitant, so Carter tried one last thing. "You probably have better things to do," he said as he pointed at the marina where people were running around, still in shock from the earthquake. That seemed to do the trick. "All right, but here is my phone number. If you find out anything, call me immediately." Carter sighed as he watched the police officer walk away, but then he turned his attention to the structure. It was covered in moss and barnacles, which was the first thing Carter focused on. He began to pull the moss off the structure and was shocked to see rusted metal underneath. "This can't be," he stammered as he pulled more moss off. After removing all of the moss, Carter took a few steps backward. He was staring at the bow of a very old ship, with the rest of the ship still buried underground. His mouth fell open as he spotted the tips of what looked like DDG painted on the bow, indicating that he was looking at a marine boat, probably a destroyer of some sort. It brought him straight back to his old job, and he brushed his hand across the cold and wet metal. As he walked around the bow, he noticed a small crack where the metal was severely rusted and easy to damage. Feeling the urge to look inside, Carter kicked through the rusted part, creating a hole he could crawl through. He used his phone as a flashlight to look around him. It was dark and empty, and he had to create another hole to get out of the bow of the ship and into the hallways below deck. All of the metal was rusted, so it was easy to break through, but that also made it dangerous. He could fall through the floor and hurt himself badly, if not fatally. Everything creaked around him as the pressure of the sand pushed against the sides of the ship. Carter had no idea how long the ship had been covered underneath the ground, but it sure did nothing good to the ship's structure. He wanted to text the police officer so at least one person knew his whereabouts, but he had no service. Carter paused, his mind racing with the eerie echoes of the dark ship. Remembering the rough creaks and groans under his feet, he felt the weight of the ship's mysterious history pulling at him. The rusted corridors whispered of dangers past and present. He could push forward into the shadowy depths alone or return for backup. Safety was a luxury he couldn't afford to ignore. As he retraced his steps through the ship, a harsh memory flashed before his eyes, a mission gone wrong due to a hasty decision. The consequences had been dire. This wasn't just about thrill-seeking. It was about survival. He couldn't shake the feeling that this ship held more secrets than were visible. Decided, he turned back toward the beach to find the officer. The moment Carter climbed out of the ship and stepped onto the sandy beach, his phone buzzed back to life. A wave of relief washed over him as he dialed the officer's number. The phone rang twice before the officer answered, his voice cautious yet intrigued. "I'm coming back," Carter announced. He needed that backup if they were to explore further safely. It didn't take long for the officer to arrive at the beach, his expression one of disbelief as he surveyed the now visible structure. "I never would have guessed," he muttered as he approached the ship. Carter watched him take in the sight of the rusty bow, the reality of the situation settling in. They were standing on the brink of a potentially dangerous exploration. "Good call on not going solo," the officer said, examining the ship's exterior. "This could have collapsed with you inside." He pulled out his phone to call in a team of specialists. "We need experts to make sure it's stable." Carter nodded, feeling vindicated in his decision to retreat. Soon, Barry and Armin would join them, ready to uncover what lay beneath. As Barry and Armin arrived, Officer Peter introduced them. "These guys are the best in marine archaeology and structural safety," he explained. They quickly formed a plan, equipping themselves with helmets featuring mounted lights, sturdy gloves, and backpacks loaded with tools. Carter felt a renewed sense of purpose as he briefed his new team on the ship's layout and potential hazards. With their gear secured, Carter led the way back into the bowels of the ship. The metal groaned under their weight as they passed through the holes Carter had previously made. Their flashlights pierced the darkness, illuminating the rusted passages ahead. Peter, Barry, and Armin followed closely, their eyes scanning every surface as they descended deeper into the ship's forgotten halls. The Combat Information Center was just as Carter remembered, dimly lit by their flashlights, but surprisingly intact. Rows of aged equipment and old maps were still fixed in place, dusty but undisturbed. The air was thick with the smell of metal and old electronics. It was a capsule of time, each piece a relic of its former glory. As they explored the room, the team found racks of uniforms, their fabrics brittle and faded, and drawers filled with sealed documents. Carter carefully opened a map, its edges crumbling to the touch. They took photos and noted the locations of potentially valuable finds, their excitement growing with each discovery. This room was a historian's dream, preserved against time's erosion. While examining some old communication devices, a sudden creak echoed through the ship. The sound was unlike the usual groans of the structure. It was sharper, a clear indication of movement. The men paused, exchanging looks. "Did the ship just settle, or was that something else?" Peter asked, his voice tense. They listened, realizing the noise had come from behind a sealed door nearby. The mechanical whir grew louder as the hidden door slid open, revealing a dark room beyond. Carter shone his light inside, illuminating an officer's quarters that seemed frozen in time. Dust motes danced in the beam as they stepped inside, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpet still intact. Everything from a neatly made bed to personal items lay undisturbed, as if waiting for its owner's return. The room was a snapshot of naval life, untouched by time or the chaos outside. Uniforms hung in the closet, and a desk sat covered with maps and personal belongings. Carter approached the desk, drawing his hand over the smooth wood. Each member of the team explored quietly, respecting the sanctity of the space that once belonged to someone significant. As they rummaged through the desk, Carter's fingers brushed against a leather-bound journal. The gold lettering on the cover read, "Captain's Log." Flipping through the pages, he found entries detailing a secret mission and cryptic references to an important object on board. His heart raced. What secrets did this ship hide? He glanced at his team, signaling them to gather around. The discovery sparked an immediate debate among the group. Officer Peter insisted on reporting their findings to their superiors, citing protocol and safety. Carter, however, felt a strong pull to explore further. "There's more to this ship than old uniforms," he argued. Barry and Armin listened, torn between their duty to follow protocol and the thrill of uncovering hidden histories. Peter's insistence on caution was met with Carter's adventurous spirit. "We might be onto something big here," Carter pressed on, his voice filled with excitement. Peter frowned, his mind racing with the potential risks. "It's not just about finding treasure, it's about doing this right," he countered. They stood in the dim light, pondering their next move, the air thick with tension and possibility. With a mutual decision to keep their findings a secret for now, the group ventured deeper into the ship. The thrill of the unknown drove them forward, their lights casting long shadows as they moved through the corridors. Each step took them further from the familiar and deeper, into the vessel's heart, where untold stories awaited their discovery. They stumbled upon an old communication room, where, to their astonishment, some equipment still hummed with power. "It's still running?" Carter whispered, flipping switches and watching dials flicker to life. The air crackled with static as screens lit up, revealing old frequencies still in operation. The room felt like a time capsule, miraculously preserved and now buzzing softly under their touch. As they experimented with the equipment, Carter's hand brushed against a lever and a sharp, repeating signal filled the room. The distress call, looping endlessly, sounded decades old. They listened, a chill running down their spines as the voice called out in vain. "This was meant to be found," Barry noted, his voice low, pondering who had last heard this plea for help. Following the signal's source led them to a secluded part of the ship. There, in a dark corner, they found the skeletal remains of a crew member, his bones clad in a tattered uniform. In his hands lay a notebook, its pages yellowed but intact. Carter carefully opened it to find a map and notes pointing to a confidential area deep within the ship. With the map as their guide, the group felt a surge of excitement mixed with apprehension. They agreed to follow the clues laid out before them, driven by the allure of uncovering historical secrets. As they prepared to delve further, the ship seemed to echo with the whispers of its past, urging them on. The promise of discovery was too potent to ignore, beckoning them deeper. The ship's corridors became a maze of danger. As they navigated the narrow, creaking passages, Carter, Peter, and the team encountered a series of technological traps. These were not just rusted relics, they were still active, set to safeguard the ship's deepest secrets. Barry carefully disabled a laser grid blocking their path, his hands steady despite the ominous buzz of the ship settling around them. Reaching a sealed door that promised more secrets, Barry knelt to examine a dusty control panel. With a few deft moves, he bypassed the ancient security system. The door groaned and slid open, revealing a room they believed held vital information about the ship's last mission. The air inside was stale, but charged with the electric excitement of new discoveries waiting in the shadowy interior. Inside the newly opened room, the team's lights flickered across an array of forgotten equipment until they settled on a single, conspicuous metal box. With reverent hands, Carter lifted it from its resting place. The box was heavy, its lock rusted but intact. They gathered around, anticipation high as they prepared to open it and possibly unlock the secrets of the ship's final hours. The ship groaned ominously as they worked on the box. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the corridor as a wall partially collapsed, blocking the exit with debris. Dust filled the air and shouts of alarm rang out. They were trapped, the danger of their environment underscored by the falling rubble. Panic briefly seized them as they assessed their new, precarious situation. In the chaos, a large metal beam fell, striking Peter and pinning his leg underneath. His cry of pain cut through the confusion, drawing immediate attention. Blood trickled down his leg as he grimaced, trying to shift the weight. "It's bad," he gasped, looking up at his worried teammates. The urgency to free him added to the tension in the air. With concerted effort, Carter, Barry and Armin heaved the heavy beam off Peter. The relief was immediate, but it was clear that Peter's leg was badly broken. He winced in pain with every slight movement. "We need to get you out of here," Armin said firmly, preparing to support Peter's weight as they planned their slow, careful retreat from the unstable ship. Realizing the urgency of Peter's condition, the group decided to split up. Armin draped Peter's arm over his shoulders, taking as much weight as he could. "We'll head straight for help," he declared. Meanwhile, Carter and Barry turned back toward the heart of the ship, determined to continue their mission and uncover more secrets, their steps quickening with purpose. Back at the sealed room, Carter and Barry examined the metal box more closely. It was locked with a heavy padlock, and its seams were expertly welded shut. "Someone really didn't want this opened," Carter muttered, tugging at the lock. The box remained stubbornly sealed, its contents a mystery that seemed more intriguing and valuable with every failed attempt to open it. Frustrated but not defeated, Barry suddenly snapped up the box. "I've got the tools for this back at the lab," he said, sliding the heavy object into his backpack. "We need to handle this carefully. Let's get it back without tipping off anyone." Carter nodded in agreement, aware that the right tools and environment were crucial for opening their find without damaging what lay inside. Just as Carter and Barry prepared to leave, they stumbled upon Armin and a limping Peter struggling towards the exit. Without hesitation, Carter and Barry supported Peter, quickening their pace out of the ship. The weight of the box on Barry's back and the burden of their injured friend added urgency to their exit from the dark, groaning corridors of the ship. After ensuring Peter was in capable medical hands at the hospital, Carter and Barry hurried to Barry's lab. They needed to open the mysterious box without damaging its potentially historic contents. Barry prepared the space meticulously, setting up tools and ensuring everything was ready for a delicate operation. The anticipation was palpable as they laid the box on the examination table. Barry's first step was to take an ultrasound of the box to see what might be inside. The images on the screen were murky at best, but it was clear there was something substantial within the metal confines. "There's definitely something here," Barry murmured, adjusting the equipment to try and get a clearer picture, but the contents remained a shadowy mystery. Next, they focused on the sturdy padlock. Barry grabbed a pair of bolt cutters, positioned them around the lock's shackle, and snapped it off with a satisfying crunch. The lock fell away, but the box remained sealed, its secrets still just out of reach. Carter watched intently, his mind racing with possibilities of what they were about to discover. With the padlock gone, the next challenge was the welding that sealed the box's edges. Barry donned a protective mask and gloves, his welder ready. Sparks flew as he carefully began to remove the welds, the tedious process requiring his full concentration and skill. Carter stood by, his excitement building with each spark that fell to the floor. As Barry worked, the lid of the box began to loosen. Carter's eyes were fixed on the slow, steady movements of Barry's hands and the tools. With every passing moment, the lid moved slightly more, hinting that they were close to finally seeing what was inside. The lab was silent, except for the hum of machinery and Barry's focused breathing. With a final tug, Barry lifted the lid off the box. Inside, everything was remarkably preserved and completely dry, a surprising find given its underwater history. They peered inside to discover papers and documents neatly stacked, each sheet covered in cryptic codes. The air in the lab was thick with the scent of mystery as they realized these documents held secrets waiting to be decoded. The contents of the box were all meticulously written in an unknown code. Barry and Carter exchanged puzzled looks, knowing they were out of their depth. "I know just the person who can crack this," Carter said with a determined grin. They knew this puzzle required a specific expertise. It was time to bring in Armin, their friend, and a seasoned decoder of such mysteries. Later that day, Barry and Carter found themselves at Armin's door, the smell of the ocean still clinging to their clothes. Armin was home, trying to wash away the day's grime. He raised an eyebrow at their unexpected visit, but his curiosity piqued when he saw the box they carried. "What's this?" he asked, wiping his hands on a towel as he stepped aside to let them in. Armin's surprise turned to intrigue as he laid eyes on the coded documents. With a swift motion, he welcomed them inside his modest living room, cluttered with books and papers. "Let's see what you've got," he said, clearing a space on his table. Carter and Barry watched as Armin prepared his tools, magnifying glass, reference books and a notepad for the task ahead. The room was silent except for the occasional turn of a page and Armin's muttered observations. Carter and Barry watched in fascination as Armin's fingers flew over the documents, his eyes scanning lines of code with practiced ease. It was a mesmerizing sight to see him work, deciphering the secrets that had been locked away in the box, possibly for decades. Armin leaned back, his eyes wide with shock as he digested the information he'd decoded. "This is a discovery of a lifetime," he whispered, almost to himself. The documents detailed a secret weapon designed during the Second World War, which could have dramatically altered its course. Carter and Barry listened, their own disbelief mirrored in Armin's stunned expression. The implications of Armin's findings hit them hard. "So this ship, it was a warship with a lost weapon?" Barry managed to ask. Nodding, Armin confirmed their suspicions. The ship they had found, buried and forgotten, was not just any vessel. It was a relic of war, potentially carrying a weapon of immense power, lost until now. Realizing the gravity of their discovery, Carter picked up his phone and called the local police. The chain reaction was immediate, from the police to the FBI and then straight to the government. Each authority was more alarmed than the last, and within hours, plans were being drawn to excavate and secure the ship carefully from its sandy grave. Under heavy security and with an air of secrecy, the ship was extracted from the ground. The operation was meticulous, involving experts from various fields to ensure the safety and preservation of the vessel and its potentially catastrophic cargo. The ship was transported to a secure facility where it could be studied and safeguarded against any risks it might pose. At the secure location, teams of military and research personnel swarmed the old warship. They began a thorough examination, aiming to recover whatever they could from the vessel. Barry, Carter and Armin could only wait and wonder about the true nature of the weapon that lay within. They hoped for answers, but understood the need for caution in dealing with such a potentially dangerous discovery. Despite the intense scrutiny and investigations, the exact nature of the weapon found inside the ship remained classified. Neither Carter nor his teammates were privy to the details. They knew they had stumbled upon something monumental, yet the deeper secrets of the ship were kept locked away by the government, wrapped in layers of security and silence that not even their clearance could penetrate. The tale of the lost ship turned Carter into a local sensation. Word of his adventure spread like wildfire through the town, and soon everyone knew his name. He was invited to share his story at community gatherings and local schools, where eager listeners hung on to every word about the mysterious ship and its hidden secrets. Carter's newfound fame led him to appear on various news channels. Each interview was a dance around the substantial NDA he had signed at the FBI's insistence. He could share the thrill of the discovery, but not the specifics of what was found. This veil of secrecy added an air of mystery to his interviews, making the story all the more tantalizing for viewers. As the months passed, the fervor surrounding the shipwreck and its cargo waned. The story that had once dominated local headlines and dinner table conversations gradually receded into the background. Carter's life returned to normalcy, but the memories of his adventure remained vivid in his mind, a constant reminder of the excitement that had briefly swept him up. The adventure rekindled a spark in Carter that he hadn't felt in years. Craving the adrenaline and camaraderie he'd experienced, Carter decided to channel this energy into a new venture. He signed up as a volunteer firefighter, eager to throw himself into another form of service that promised not just thrills, but the chance to make a real difference in his community.